The heart monitor beeped a slow, agonizing rhythm that echoed through the bulletproof nursery of the Rossi estate. Little Leo, heir to a ruthless $2 billion criminal empire, was starving to death. Top pediatricians from Mount Sinai Hospital had failed. Intravenous lines were rejected by his tiny, bruised veins. Lorenzo Rossi, a man who could order a Mafia hit with a flick of his wrist, was completely powerless as his son faded. The baby violently refused every drop of synthetic formula. He was dying, until a lowly maid hiding a tragic and painful secret of her own crossed the threshold in the dead of night and did the unthinkable. The Rossi estate sat like an impenetrable fortress on the cliffs of Long Island, heavily guarded by men carrying suppressed automatic weapons beneath tailored Italian suits. Inside the mansion was a masterclass in wealth and power, dripping with imported marble and Renaissance art. But to Lorenzo Rossi, the undisputed head of the Rossi syndicate, the mansion felt like a sprawling tomb. 2 months ago, Lorenzo's world had been violently fractured. A car bomb planted by the rival Moretti family had detonated outside a charity gala in Manhattan. Lorenzo survived with a few fractured ribs. His wife, Sophia, did not. She was 8 months pregnant at the time. The trauma surgeons at New York Presbyterian had managed to deliver baby Leo in the final seconds of Sophia's life, pulling the premature heir from the wreckage of his mother's body. Lorenzo had exacted his revenge, painting the streets of Brooklyn red until the Moretti bloodline was extinguished. But the blood on the streets couldn't save his son. Leo was failing to thrive. At 2 months old, the baby looked like a porcelain doll on the verge of shattering. His skin was translucent, his breathing shallow. For the past 2 weeks, Leo had begun violently rejecting all food. The finest organic formulas, donor breast milk sourced from elite private clinics, specialized intravenous nutrient drips, he purged all of it. "His digestive system is shutting down, Mr. Rossi," Dr. Harrison Gallagher, the lead neonatologist, said. The doctor was sweating profusely, dabbing his forehead with a silk handkerchief. Standing in the middle of Lorenzo's dark mahogany study, surrounded by the Don's heavily armed capos, the doctor knew he was delivering news that could cost him his life. "We've run every toxicology screen, every genetic panel. There is no medical explanation for the absolute rejection of the nutrients. His body is simply giving up." Lorenzo, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the Atlantic, crushed the crystal whiskey glass in his hand. The sharp shards sliced into his palm, but he didn't flinch. Blood dripped onto the Persian rug. "You are telling me," Lorenzo said, his voice a low, terrifying rasp, "that I can buy half the judges in New York State. But I cannot buy a single ounce of fat for my son's bones. I'm sorry, Don Lorenzo. We have maybe 48 hours before his organs begin to fail completely." Downstairs, completely oblivious to the Mafia politics and the impending tragedy, was Hunter Higgins. Hunter was 24, hollow-eyed, and moving through the mansion's massive corridors like a ghost. She wore the standard black and white uniform of the estate's cleaning staff, scrubbing the baseboards of the East Wing until her knuckles bled. Hunter was a woman running from her own private hell. 3 weeks ago, her abusive ex-boyfriend, a small-time gambler who owed $50,000 to loan sharks, had shoved her down a flight of stairs during a drunken rage. Hunter had been 38 weeks pregnant. She lost the baby, a little girl she had already named Lily. The physical pain of her recovering body was nothing compared to the crushing emotional void, but nature was cruel. Despite her baby being gone, Hunter's body didn't know that. Her breasts were painfully engorged, leaking milk for a child who would never cry for it. She bound her chest with tight bandages beneath her maid's uniform, popping black market painkillers just to get through her grueling 12-hour shifts. She had taken this job hired through a discreet, no-questions-asked agency because the loan sharks her ex had provoked were now hunting her. She needed cash, and the Rossi estate paid in thick envelopes of untraceable $100 bills. Hunter was told 3 rules on her first day. Keep your head down, never speak to the armed men, and never under any circumstances go near the master suite or the nursery on the 3rd floor. But grief is a strange compass, and that night the house was unusually quiet. It was 2 a.m. Hunter was polishing the banister on the 2nd floor landing when she heard it. A cry. It wasn't a normal baby's cry. It was a weak, raspy, pitiful sound. The sound of a tiny creature that had fought its final battle and was whimpering in defeat. Hunter froze. The rag dropped from her hand. Deep within her chest, a primal biological trigger snapped. Her milk let down, dampening the bandages beneath her shirt with a sharp, burning ache. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She knew she shouldn't move. She knew there were cameras. She knew the men who guarded this house made people disappear for lesser offenses. But the cry came again. So frail, so desperate. Hunter abandoned her cleaning supplies and began to climb the grand staircase toward the forbidden 3rd floor. The 3rd floor hallway was dimly lit by antique sconces. At the far end stood the heavy oak door of the nursery, slightly ajar. Hunter crept forward, her rubber-soled shoes making no sound against the thick carpet. She expected to see guards, but the hallway was empty. Later, she would learn that Lorenzo had dismissed everyone, unable to bear the sight of strangers watching his son die, wanting the floor completely isolated. Hunter peeked through the crack in the door. The nursery was the size of a standard apartment, equipped with medical monitors that blinked in the gloom. In the center was a massive hand-carved mahogany crib. Next to it, slumped in a plush leather armchair, was the night nurse, Beatrice. The older woman was fast asleep, a half-empty bottle of high-end Chardonnay sitting on the side table beside her. Anger flared hot and sudden in Hunter's chest. How could she sleep while a baby was crying? Hunter slipped inside the room. The air was sterile, smelling faintly of rubbing alcohol and expensive baby powder. She approached the crib and looked down. The sight of little Leo broke whatever remained of Hunter's fragile heart. He was so tiny, hooked up to a tangle of tubes that looked monstrous against his pale skin. His little fists were clenched, his face scrunched in a weak, silent sob. He was rooting, turning his little head side to side, opening his mouth in a desperate search for nourishment. "Oh, sweet boy," Hunter whispered, tears immediately spilling over her lashes. "You're so hungry." I know. Without thinking, driven by a raw, devastating instinct that overwhelmed her, fear of the Mafia boss who owned this house, Hunter reached into the crib. She carefully maneuvered around the wires and scooped the fragile baby into her arms. He felt weightless, too light. She sat on the edge of the velvet window seat, turning her back to the sleeping nurse. Her chest was throbbing with painful pressure. Trembling, Hunter unbuttoned the top of her maid's uniform, pulled aside the restrictive bandages, and guided the baby's face to her bare breast. For a terrifying second, Leo didn't move. He lay limp against her skin. Then a miracle happened. The scent of natural, warm mother's milk, not the sterile, chemically processed donor milk or formula he had been force-fed, hit his senses. Leo's tiny mouth opened. He latched on. Hunter gasped, a sob of relief and physical release escaping her lips as the baby began to suckle. It was weak, at first uncoordinated, but within seconds the rhythm steadied. Suck, swallow, breathe. The sound was the most beautiful music Hunter had ever heard. Tears streamed down her face, falling onto Leo's dark, wispy hair as she cradled him, rocking him gently. "That's it, sweetheart," she breathed, entirely lost in the moment. "Drink. I've got you." The rhythmic, steady beep. Beep. Beep of the heart monitor began to strengthen the tempo, smoothing out as the baby's distress faded into the comfort of a mother's warmth. "Step away from my son." The voice was cold, quiet, and carried the weight of a loaded gun. Hunter's blood ran to ice. She slowly lifted her head. Standing in the doorway was Lorenzo Rossi. He was still wearing his suit trousers and a crisp white shirt. The sleeves rolled up to reveal dark tattoos wrapping around his forearms. In his right hand, leveled perfectly at Hunter's head, was a suppressed Heckler & Koch USP pistol. Behind him, two massive bodyguards, Dominic and Rocco, stood with their weapons drawn, their eyes scanning the room. The sleeping nurse, Beatrice, jerked awake, gasping as she saw the Don holding a gun. "Mr. Rossi, I just closed my eyes for a second. This maid. She snuck in." "Shut up, Beatrice," Lorenzo hissed, never taking his dark, lethal eyes off Hunter. He stepped fully into the room. "I will ask you one time before I put a bullet between your eyes. What are you doing to my son?" Hunter was paralyzed with terror, but she didn't drop the baby. Her protective instinct flared, and she curled her body defensively around Leo, shielding him from the weapons. He was hungry," she stammered, tears tracking through the dust on her cheeks. "He was crying. Nobody was helping him." Lorenzo stepped closer, the gun unwavering. "He rejects all food. He throws it up. Put him down. Now." "Look at him," Hunter sobbed, her voice cracking. She tilted her body just enough for Lorenzo to see. Lorenzo's breath hitched. He froze. Leo wasn't choking. He wasn't gagging or turning blue, as he had with every bottle for the last 2 weeks. The baby's eyes were closed in peaceful bliss, his tiny jaw working rhythmically as he drank deeply. For the first time in his short, tragic life, a faint flush of pink was creeping into his pale cheeks. The heavy silence in the room was broken only by the soft, wet sounds of the baby swallowing. Lorenzo slowly lowered his weapon. His hands, which had strangled men to death without a tremor, were shaking. He looked from his son to the terrified, tear-streaked face of the young maid. "Rocco," Lorenzo said softly, his voice thick with an emotion he hadn't felt since his wife died. "Get Beatrice out of my sight. If I ever see her in this state again, she goes in the river." "Yes, boss," Rocco grunted, hauling the screaming nurse out of the room by her collar. Lorenzo walked slowly toward Hunter, who pressed herself back against the window pane, clutching the feeding baby. He stopped just inches from her. He looked down at the child, watching the steady rise and fall of Leo's chest. Then his dark eyes snapped up to meet Hunter's. "Who are you?" he demanded softly. Within the hour, Hunter's entire life was laid bare on the massive oak desk in Lorenzo's study. Silas, the syndicate's chief intelligence gatherer and hacker, handed Lorenzo an encrypted tablet. "Hunter Higgins, 24, clean record. Hired 3 days ago by the contracted cleaning service. Ex-boyfriend is Tommy Vance, a deadbeat who owes 50 grand to the Russian mob in Brighton Beach. The medical records from St. Jude's Medical Center confirm it, boss. She gave birth to a stillborn daughter exactly 22 days ago. She's biologically primed to nurse. Lorenzo sat in the leather chair, staring at the security footage from the nursery. He watched the replay of Hunter holding his son, the way she instinctively shielded Leo with her own body when the guns were drawn. A civilian, a nobody. Yet she had done what millions of dollars in medical science could not. "Pay off her ex's debt to the Russians," Lorenzo commanded, without looking up from the screen. "Then have Dante pay him a visit, break both his legs, and tell him if he ever says her name again, I'll take his hands. Erase her apartment lease. Have her belongings brought here." Silas nodded, understood, and the girl, she doesn't leave this property. Ever. Back in the nursery, Hunter was utterly bewildered. An hour ago, she was a scrub maid facing eviction and mob violence. Now she was sitting in a velvet rocking chair, wrapped in a plush silk robe that one of the maids had hurriedly brought her. Little Leo was fast asleep against her chest, full and content for the first time in his life. The door opened, and Lorenzo walked in. He moved with the quiet, predatory grace of a man who owned everything he surveyed. He dismissed the two guards at the door with a nod and closed it behind him. Hunter tensed instinctively, tightening her grip on the sleeping baby. "He's asleep," Lorenzo said, his voice stripped of the harsh violence from earlier. He pulled up a chair and sat opposite her. "Dr. Gallagher just checked his vitals. His heart rate is normal. His oxygen levels are up. He kept the milk down. He just needed a mother's touch," Hunter whispered, looking down at the boy. "Formula and plastic bottles. Sometimes babies who have been through trauma just need the warmth, the skin to skin." Lorenzo stared at her intensely. "You lost a child?" Hunter flinched, the fresh wound of her grief torn open. "Yes." "I am sorry for your loss," Lorenzo said, and to Hunter's surprise, he sounded entirely genuine. The ruthless Mafia Don had shadows under his eyes that mirrored her own. "My wife was taken from me. They tried to take my son. I will not allow that to happen. You saved his life tonight, Hunter. For that you have my gratitude, and you have my protection." "Protection?" Hunter asked, her voice trembling. "Your debts are cleared. The men looking for you will never bother you again. You no longer clean this house. You are Leo's wet nurse. You will have the suite adjoining this nursery. You will have a salary of $20,000 a week. You want for nothing. But in exchange, you belong to the Rossi family now. You do not leave this estate without my armed escort. You dedicate every breath you have to keeping my son alive. Do we have a deal?" It wasn't a question. It was a mandate. Hunter looked at the sleeping baby. She had nothing left in the world. No family, no home, no baby of her own. This little boy needed her, and in a strange, twisted way, she needed him just as much to heal her shattered heart. "Yes," Hunter whispered. For the next week, Hunter's life transformed. She lived in a sprawling, luxurious suite. She ate meals prepared by a private chef designed specifically to boost her milk supply. And Leo flourished. Under Hunter's constant care and feeding, the baby gained weight. The bluish tint to his skin turned into a healthy, rosy glow. He began to open his dark eyes more frequently, locking onto Hunter's face with intense focus. Lorenzo visited the nursery every evening. The terrifying Don would sit quietly in the armchair, watching Hunter feed and rock his son. They rarely spoke, but a strange, unspoken bond was forming between the grieving mafioso and the broken woman who had brought life back into his home. But Hunter was highly observant. Surviving an abusive relationship had taught her to read the subtle shifts in a room. And something in the Rossi household was deeply wrong. It started with Camilla Romano Sofia's younger sister. Camilla visited the estate under the guise of an aunt, checking on her ailing nephew. Camilla was stunning, dressed in head-to-toe Prada, dripping in diamonds. When she entered the nursery and saw Leo looking plump and healthy in Hunter's arms, Hunter caught a micro-expression on Camilla's face. It wasn't joy. It was pure, unadulterated fury. Camilla quickly masked it with a saccharine smile. "Oh, my sweet nephew. It's a miracle. And you." Camilla looked Hunter up and down with barely concealed disgust. "The hero maid. How rustic." Hunter kept her head down, but her instincts screamed. The suspicion turned into terrifying reality 2 nights later. Hunter was in the adjoining kitchen of the nursery suite, preparing a cup of lactation tea. The estate was asleep. The new night nurse, a young woman named Sarah, had stepped out to use the restroom. Hunter noticed a row of sealed, specialized glass bottles of the organic formula that Leo had previously been rejecting. Lorenzo had ordered them kept in the medical fridge, just in case Hunter's supply ever failed. Hunter opened the fridge. One of the tamper-evident seals on a brand-new bottle of formula was slightly lifted. Frowning, Hunter pulled the bottle out. She unscrewed the cap and sniffed. Underneath the sweet, milky scent of the formula, there was a faint, metallic odor, almost like bitter almonds. Hunter remembered what Dr. Gallagher had said. His digestive system is shutting down. We've run toxicology screens. But what if they were looking for the wrong poisons? What if it was something exotic, untraceable in standard panels? Suddenly, a shadow fell across the kitchen doorway. Hunter spun around. Standing there in the dim light was Beatrice, the former head nurse Lorenzo had fired and ordered thrown out of the house. But she wasn't gone. She was holding a silenced pistol, and it was pointed directly at Hunter's chest. "You should have just kept cleaning the floors, little girl," Beatrice sneered, pulling back the hammer of the gun. "You're ruining everything." The sterile, humming, fluorescent light of the medical fridge illuminated Beatrice's twisted face. Hunter stood perfectly still, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The silenced pistol in the former nurse's hand was steady, a chilling extension of her malice. In Hunter's left hand, she still held the open bottle of tainted organic formula. "You were supposed to be a nobody," Beatrice hissed, stepping further into the kitchen and kicking the door shut behind her. A tragic little scrub maid who would be gone in a week. "Do you know how much money I was promised when that brat finally gave out $2 million? A villa in Tuscany. And you little cow, you ruined months of careful dosing." Hunter's mind raced, adrenaline flooding her system. The pieces of the horrific puzzle violently snapped together. "You poisoned him," Hunter whispered, her voice shaking with a mixture of terror and overwhelming maternal rage. He wasn't sick. His organs weren't failing naturally. You were slowly killing a newborn baby right under his father's roof. "Not me." Beatrice scoffed, her eyes gleaming with manic greed. "I just delivered the meals. The formula was pre-spiked, just a drop a day of something special imported from a private lab in Zurich, untraceable, mimics severe gastrointestinal failure. The doctors at Mount Sinai were completely fooled. Everyone was, until you decided to play savior." "Why?" Hunter demanded, subtly shifting her weight. The counter behind her held the heavy electric kettle she had just used for her tea. It was still piping hot. "Lorenzo will kill you. He will tear you apart." "Lorenzo will never know." Beatrice smiled, raising the gun to aim directly between Hunter's eyes. "I'm going to shoot you. Put the gun in your hand and tell the Don you snapped. Grieving mother syndrome. You killed yourself, and sadly in the struggle the baby got hurt. A tragedy, really." Beatrice's finger tightened on the trigger. Surviving the brutal physical abuse of her past had taught Hunter one vital lesson. When cornered, you do not freeze. You fight. With a guttural scream, Hunter violently hurled the open bottle of poisoned formula directly at Beatrice's face. The thick, pungent liquid splashed into the woman's eyes. Beatrice shrieked, her finger jerking on the trigger. A muffled hoot echoed through the kitchen, and a bullet shattered the expensive marble backsplash inches from Hunter's ear, raining sharp stone fragments over her shoulders. Before Beatrice could wipe her eyes and fire again, Hunter lunged backward, grabbed the handle of the boiling electric kettle, and swung it with all her might. The heavy base connected with a sickening crack against the side of Beatrice's head, simultaneously dousing the older woman in scalding water. Beatrice collapsed to the floor, screaming in agony, the gun skittering across the polished hardwood. Hunter didn't hesitate. She threw herself onto the weapon, kicking it under the massive stainless steel island, and then bolted for the nursery door. But she didn't need to reach it. The heavy oak door was kicked open with such explosive force that the frame splintered. Lorenzo stood there, a terrifying vision of pure, unleashed violence. He was shirtless, having clearly rushed from his own bed, his torso covered in intricate Sicilian Mafia ink. In his hand was a massive Kimber 1911. Behind him, Dominic and Rocco poured into the room, assault rifles raised. Lorenzo's eyes locked onto Hunter, who was trembling, covered in marble dust, and spilled milk, gasping for breath. Then his lethal gaze dropped to Beatrice, who was writhing and sobbing on the kitchen floor. "Secure the perimeter!" Lorenzo roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandeliers. "Dominic, check my son. The boy is safe, boss." Dominic called out a second later from the nursery. "Fast asleep." Lorenzo holstered his weapon and crossed the room in 3 long strides, grabbing Beatrice by the throat and lifting her off the ground as if she weighed nothing. His face was a mask of absolute chilling fury. "You have exactly 5 seconds to explain why you are in my son's suite with a weapon, or I will peel the skin from your bones. She poisoned him, she poisoned." Hunter cried out, her knees finally giving way. She slid down the kitchen cabinets to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "Lorenzo." She poisoned the formula. That's why Leo was dying. He wasn't sick. He was being murdered. Lorenzo froze. The temperature in the room seemed to drop below freezing. He slowly turned his head to look at Hunter, processing her words, before turning his dead, hollow eyes back to the gasping nurse in his grip. "Is it true?" Lorenzo asked. It wasn't a yell. It was a whisper, which was infinitely more terrifying. I... Beatrice choked, her face turning purple. Lorenzo slammed her against the refrigerator, denting the stainless steel. "Who gave the order? Please," she begged, tears streaming down her scalded face. "She'll kill my family. She promised me." "I don't care about your family," Lorenzo said, his thumb pressing into her windpipe. "Give me a name, Beatrice, or you won't live to see the sun rise over the Atlantic." "Camilla," Beatrice shrieked, thrashing in his grip. "It was Camilla Romano." "Your sister-in-law." Silence fell over the kitchen, broken only by Hunter's ragged breathing. Lorenzo closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, the ultimate betrayal registering on his hardened features. Sophia's own sister, the woman who had stood crying at the funeral. Lorenzo dropped Beatrice. She crumpled to the floor, gasping for air. "Rocco!" Lorenzo commanded, his voice devoid of all human emotion. "Take her to the soundproof basement. Call the cleanup crew. I want every single bottle, every drop of formula in this house boxed up as evidence for Silas. Nobody sleeps tonight." "Yes, Don Lorenzo," as the guards dragged the sobbing nurse away. Lorenzo turned his attention back to Hunter. The Mafia kingpin knelt on the floor beside her. He reached out his large, calloused hands, gently brushing the marble dust from her hair. He noticed the slight cut on her cheek, where a stone fragment had grazed her. "You fought her," Lorenzo murmured, his dark eyes tracing her face with a mixture of awe and profound respect. "She was going to hurt Leo," Hunter whispered fiercely, wrapping her arms around her own chest. "I couldn't let her. I won't let anyone hurt him." Lorenzo's expression softened, a crack forming in the impenetrable armor he wore for the world. He reached forward and, to Hunter's shock, pulled her into his chest. He held her tightly, burying his face in her hair. She smelled like milk, honey, and gunpowder. "You saved him again," Lorenzo swore into the darkness of the kitchen. "I vow on my life, Hunter, you will never have to fight for your life in my house again." By 6 a.m. the next morning, the Rossi estate was empty. Lorenzo wasn't taking any chances. If Camilla Romano had infiltrated his inner circle once she could do it again. The sprawling Long Island mansion was a fortress, but a compromised one. Under the cover of darkness, in a convoy of armored black Cadillac Escalades, Lorenzo moved his most precious assets to a location known only to 3 people in the world. It was a $40 million off-the-books penthouse in the heart of Tribeca. Occupying the entire top floor of a high-rise, it featured biometric locks, bulletproof floor-to-ceiling windows, a private medical bay, and a dedicated elevator requiring retinal scans. Hunter stood by the massive windows, holding little Leo. The morning sun was rising over the New York City skyline, casting a golden glow over the sleeping infant. He had just finished a full feeding and was nestled heavily against her chest, swaddled in a cashmere blanket. Hunter felt a profound, overwhelming love for this child. He had filled the gaping, bleeding hole in her heart, left by her daughter. "The view is better here," a deep voice rumbled behind her. Hunter turned. Lorenzo was standing in the doorway of the living room. The exhaustion of the past 24 hours was etched deeply into the lines around his eyes, and his jaw was covered in dark stubble. He poured himself a measure of scotch from a crystal decanter, despite the early hour. "It's beautiful," Hunter agreed softly. "Is he safe here, Lorenzo?" "He is untouchable here," Lorenzo replied, walking over to join her at the window. He looked down at his son, gently trailing a thick finger over the baby's plump cheek. "Silas analyzed the formula you threw. It was laced with ricin and a synthetic cardiac depressant. It was designed to mimic sudden infant death syndrome eventually. Camilla wanted the heir gone." "But why?" Hunter asked, her brow furrowing. "He's her nephew. He's her sister's blood." "Money and power, Hunter. It's the only language the 5 families speak," Lorenzo said bitterly, taking a sip of the amber liquid. "When Sophia died, her family's syndicate, the Romanos, was supposed to merge fully with mine under Leo's name. If Leo dies, the Romano assets revert entirely to Camilla. Furthermore, I believe she wants to force a marriage between us to consolidate power. She thinks if I am grieving and vulnerable, I will turn to her." Hunter felt a sharp stab of an unfamiliar emotion in her chest. Jealousy. The thought of that perfectly manicured, venomous woman touching Lorenzo made Hunter's blood run hot. She instinctively pulled Leo a fraction closer. Lorenzo noticed the protective gesture. A faint, genuine smile touched his lips. "You don't have to worry, mia cara. Camilla Romano will never set foot near you or my son again. But I cannot simply execute her. If I kill the head of the Romano family without ironclad proof presented to the Commission, it will start a Mafia war that will burn New York to the ground. I need her to confess. I need to draw her out. How? By letting her think she won. Over the next 3 days, the penthouse became an isolated sanctuary. Lorenzo rarely left running his massive criminal empire from a bank of encrypted servers in the den. For Hunter, it was a strange, suspended reality. She was a captive, yet she had never felt safer or more cherished. Lorenzo treated her not as an employee, but as an equal. He ordered the finest clothes delivered from Bergdorf Goodman for her soft silk loungewear, tailored dresses, cashmere sweaters. He ate dinner with her every night, asking about her life before the trauma, listening intently to her stories about her childhood in upstate New York. The physical proximity was intoxicating. Whenever Hunter fed Leo in the evenings, Lorenzo would sit close by. He watched her with a hungry, reverent intensity that made Hunter's skin flush and her breath catch. The boundaries between Mafia Don and wet nurse, between protector and protected, were blurring into something deep, powerful, and deeply romantic. On the 4th night, Lorenzo put his plan into motion. He sat at the dining table, a burner phone in his hand. Hunter sat across from him, bouncing a cooing Leo on her knee. "I am going to make the call," Lorenzo said, his eyes meeting Hunter's. "Are you ready?" Hunter nodded, her jaw set. "Do it." Lorenzo dialed Camilla's private number. He put the phone on speaker and set it on the table. He took a deep breath, instantly transforming his posture and voice. Gone was the strong, steady protector. In his place was a broken, grieving father. "Lorenzo." Camilla's voice purred through the speaker, dripping with false sympathy. "Darling, I've been trying to reach you for days. Rumors are flying. Is everything all right at the estate?" "Camilla," Lorenzo rasped, forcing his voice to crack. It's Leo." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Oh God. Lorenzo, no." "What happened?" He took a turn for the worse. Lorenzo lied smoothly, clutching the edge of the table. "The new nurse, that maid. She was incompetent. She dropped him. He's in the private ICU at New York Presbyterian. They don't think he's going to make it through the night. His heart is failing." Hunter watched, mesmerized by Lorenzo's terrifying ability to manipulate. "I am so sorry, Lorenzo," Camilla said. Hunter could practically hear the triumphant smirk in the woman's voice. "I am coming to the hospital right now. You shouldn't be alone." "No," Lorenzo said quickly. "I can't bear the hospital. I left him with the doctors. I'm at the old safe house, the one by the docks in Brooklyn. I just need you, Camilla. You're the only family I have left." "I'll be right there, my love," Camilla whispered. "Don't move." The line clicked dead. Lorenzo's expression instantly turned to stone. He stood up, checking the magazine of his pistol. "She took the bait," Lorenzo said, his voice lethal. "She's going to the Brooklyn warehouse to comfort the grieving widower. Silas and Dominic are waiting with the recording equipment. When she gloats, we have her." Hunter stood up, holding Leo tight. "Be careful, Lorenzo. Please." Lorenzo crossed the room, stepping into Hunter's personal space. He reached out, cupping the back of her neck with a warm, heavy hand. His thumb gently stroked her jawline. "I will always come back to you," Lorenzo murmured, his gaze dropping to her lips. Slowly, deliberately, he leaned down and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her forehead, then to the crown of Leo's head. Lock the doors. Do not open them for anyone but me." As the private elevator doors closed behind Lorenzo, Hunter felt a deep chill settle over the penthouse. She walked over to the security monitors, watching the cameras that monitored the street below. 20 minutes passed. Suddenly, Hunter's phone buzzed on the counter. It was an encrypted text from a number she didn't recognize. "Did you really think I was stupid enough to go to Brooklyn? Little bird, I tracked Lorenzo's burner phone. I know exactly where you are." Before Hunter could scream, the lights in the penthouse completely cut out. The heavy blast doors of the private elevator began to grind open in the darkness. The heavy steel-reinforced doors of the private elevator ground open with a metallic screech that echoed through the pitch-black Tribeca penthouse. Hunter stood frozen in the center of the massive living room. The panoramic views of the New York skyline, usually breathtaking now, only provided faint ambient light from the city below. The penthouse's main power grid had been completely severed. A second later, the emergency backup generators kicked in, bathing the corridors in a low, eerie red LED glow. Hunter clutched little Leo tightly to her chest. The baby, sensing the sudden shift in his protector's heart rate, began to whimper. "Shh, sweet boy," Hunter breathed frantically, pressing her lips to his warm forehead. She covered his small ear with her hand, praying he wouldn't cry. From the darkness of the foyer, the distinct rhythmic click-clack of high heels on the imported Brazilian hardwood floor broke the silence. "Lorenzo always was too predictable," a woman's voice echoed through the sprawling apartment. The voice was smooth-cultured and dripping with venom. It was Camilla Romano. "He thinks like a blunt instrument, a hammer, but I think like a scalpel. Did he honestly believe I wouldn't recognize a trap I paid a rogue, ex-Mossad contractor $3 million to plant Pegasus spyware on his private servers last month? I haven't just been tracking his burner phone, little bird. I've been watching you through the security cameras for 3 days. Hunter's blood ran cold. The realization hit her like a physical blow. Camilla had watched her bond with Leo. She had watched Lorenzo kiss her forehead. This wasn't just about Mafia politics anymore. It was deeply, violently personal. Hunter knew she couldn't outrun Camilla's men in the open, and she certainly couldn't fight armed Mafia hitmen with a baby in her arms. She needed a weapon, and she needed a stronghold. She turned and sprinted silently on her bare feet down the long red-lit corridor toward the medical bay. It was the most fortified room in the penthouse, aside from the panic room, which Hunter didn't have the biometric clearance to open. "Where are you hiding, little milkmaid?" Camilla taunted, her voice drifting closer. The heavy scent of her Tom Ford black orchid perfume began to snake through the stale air of the penthouse. "You can't protect him. He was a mistake. A premature, weak little complication that stands between me and a $2 billion empire." Hunter slipped inside the medical bay and eased the heavy door shut, locking the deadbolt. Her hands were shaking violently. She laid the swaddled, fussing baby into the padded medical bassinet. "Stay quiet, my brave boy. Just for a minute." Hunter whispered, tears welling in her eyes. She frantically searched the stainless steel counters. There were no guns in here. Lorenzo kept his armory in the master suite. But this was a fully equipped trauma room designed to patch up gunshot wounds off the books. Hunter ripped open a sterilized drawer and pulled out a surgical scalpel. The carbon steel blade glinted menacingly in the red emergency light. She also grabbed a heavy, solid steel portable defibrillator unit. Outside the door, the footsteps stopped. Do you know how pathetic you are? Camilla's voice was muffled through the thick wood, but it was right outside. A scrub maid playing house with the Don of the Rossi Syndicate. He doesn't love you. He's using you as a biological pacifier for his dying brat. The moment that baby is weaned, you'll be thrown back into the gutter where you belong. Hunter's grip on the scalpel tightened until her knuckles turned white. The psychological warfare was meant to break her, but Camilla severely underestimated the sheer terrifying power of a mother's grief and love. Hunter had already lost one child to a violent monster. She would absolutely not lose another. Boom! A suppressed gunshot shattered the lock on the medical bay door. Wood splinters flew across the room. The door was kicked open with brutal force. Camilla stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the red emergency lights. She was dressed in a pristine white trench coat, holding a customized gold-plated Glock 19. Two massive, heavily armed enforcers stood behind her in the hall. Camilla stepped into the room, her cold eyes scanning the shadows until they locked onto the bassinet. She smiled, a terrifying, predatory stretching of her red lips. "There's the little heir. Get out," Hunter said. She stepped out from the shadows beside the door, placing her body directly between Camilla and the bassinet. She held the scalpel outward in a defensive stance, her eyes burning with a fierce, untamed fury. Camilla laughed softly, genuinely amused. "You brought a tiny knife to a gunfight, Hunter. How quaint." She raised the Glock, pointing it directly at Hunter's chest. "Kill the maid," Camilla ordered her men without looking back. "I want to handle the baby myself. A pillow over the face will leave no marks. A tragic crib death." One of the enforcers stepped forward, reaching out a massive hand to grab Hunter by the throat. Hunter didn't flinch. In a fraction of a second, she hurled the heavy steel defibrillator unit directly at the enforcer's knees. The massive weight connected with a sickening crunch. The man roared in pain, his legs buckling his assault rifle, clattering to the floor. Before the second enforcer could react, Hunter lunged forward with terrifying speed, driving the surgical scalpel deep into the wrist of Camilla's gun hand. Camilla shrieked a piercing sound of absolute agony. The gold-plated Glock dropped from her fingers, clattering across the sterile tiles. Blood bloomed instantly across her pristine white sleeve. "You bitch!" Camilla screamed, stumbling backward and clutching her arm. "Shoot her! Shoot her, now!" The second enforcer raised his weapon, leveling the barrel at Hunter's head. Hunter stood her ground in front of Leo's bassinet, bracing herself for the impact, throwing her arms wide to shield the child behind her. She squeezed her eyes shut. "I love you, Leo." But the gunshot that echoed through the room didn't come from the enforcer. It came from the hallway. The enforcer's chest exploded outward in a spray of crimson, and he collapsed dead onto the floor. Hunter gasped, her eyes flying open. Standing at the end of the red-lit corridor, looking like a god of war bathed in blood and shadows, was Lorenzo Rossi. The deafening roar of the gunshot in the enclosed red-lit corridor was absolute. It shattered the tense silence of the medical bay, leaving a high-pitched ringing in Hunter's ears. Time seemed to fracture, slowing down to an agonizing crawl. The massive enforcer, who had been a fraction of a second away from pulling the trigger on Hunter, did not even have the chance to gasp. His chest exploded outward in a horrific spray of crimson, the kinetic force of the heavy caliber round lifting his body entirely off the imported Brazilian hardwood floor. He collapsed backward, a dead weight, his assault rifle clattering uselessly against the baseboards. Hunter stood frozen in front of the bassinet, her lungs burning, her eyes squeezed shut as she shielded little Leo with her own body. The sharp tang of copper and the sulphurous stench of burned cordite flooded the sterile air of the trauma room. A heavy, terrifying silence followed the blast. Slowly, Hunter opened her eyes. The emergency LED lights cast long, distorted shadows across the hallway. Stepping over the shattered remains of the heavy oak door was Lorenzo Rossi. He was a terrifying vision of unleashed primal violence. He had discarded his tailored suit jacket, somewhere between the ground floor and the penthouse. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up to reveal the intricate dark ink of his Sicilian syndicate tattoos. In his massive hands he held a Benelli M4 tactical shotgun, the barrel still smoking in the dim light. Behind him, moving with the synchronized lethal precision of a highly trained paramilitary unit, were Dominic Rocco and half a dozen of the Rossi Syndicate's most feared soldiers. They poured out of the emergency stairwell, their weapons drawn, sweeping the perimeter with ruthless efficiency. They hadn't gone to the docks in Brooklyn. It had all been an elaborate, brilliant lie. "Did you honestly believe?" Lorenzo's voice boomed through the shattered doorway, a terrifying, resonant baritone that seemed to vibrate the very foundation of the high-rise, "that I would not know when a rat chewed on the wires of my own house, Camilla Romano, pale as a ghost, and clutching her profusely bleeding wrist where Hunter had buried the scalpel backed away. She hit the edge of a stainless steel medical counter, her pristine white trench coat now ruined with the blood of her own men. Her arrogant, venomous sneer instantly dissolved into sheer, unadulterated terror. "Lorenzo," Camilla stammered, her eyes darting frantically between the smoking barrel of his shotgun and the cold, dead eyes of his men. You were at the warehouse. The tracker." "Silas found the Pegasus spyware buried in our encrypted servers 4 hours ago." Lorenzo snarled, stepping fully into the room. He did not spare a single glance for the dead enforcers bleeding out on his floor. His dark, frantic eyes immediately sought out Hunter. When Lorenzo saw her standing there, barefoot, trembling, covered in a light dusting of plaster, but aggressively shielding his son's bassinet with a bloody surgical scalpel still gripped in her hand, a profound, staggering look of relief washed over his hardened features. The lethal tension in his jaw relaxed by a fraction of an inch. He lowered the barrel of the Benelli. "I traced the IP address of your rogue hacker." Lorenzo continued, finally turning his dead, hollow gaze back to Camilla. "Gideon Shaw, operating out of a shell company server farm in Hoboken, New Jersey. We paid Mr. Shaw a very personal visit an hour ago. He was surprisingly cooperative after Dante broke his first 3 fingers with a ball-peen hammer. He handed over every encrypted file, every offshore wire transfer, routed through Credit Suisse, and exactly what you were planning to do here tonight." Camilla's knees visibly buckled. She slid down the side of the medical cabinets, leaving a smear of red against the pristine white enamel. "Lorenzo, please, you have to understand. We are family. Sophia's blood flows in my veins. I did this for the Syndicate. Do not ever speak my dead wife's name in my presence again." Lorenzo roared, the sound echoing like a physical blow. He closed the distance between them in 2 massive strides, towering over the cowering woman. "You poisoned my infant son. You orchestrated a slow, agonizing assassination of a baby. And tonight you tried to murder the only woman who managed to save his life." "I had to," Camilla shrieked hysterically, the polished veneer of the Mafia princess finally cracking entirely. The Romano family is bankrupt, Lorenzo. My father made terrible investments in the Fulton Fish Market territories before he died. We owe $40 million to the Sinaloa cartel. They were going to skin me. If Leo inherited the Romano estate, the assets would be locked in a trust for 18 years. I needed the capital liquidated now. I needed the boy out of the way. Hunter listened from the shadows of the bassinet, her stomach turning. It was never about power or some grand Mafia vision. It was about greed. Pure, pathetic greed and terrible debts. A tiny, innocent baby was suffering organ failure simply because his aunt needed to pay off a cartel. Your debts are your own grave, Camilla, Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly whisper. You are a cancer, and tonight I am cutting you out. You can't touch me, Camilla cried, desperation making her voice shrill. The commission, the 5 families will demand a sit-down. You cannot execute a Romano boss without a trial and ironclad proof. The Lucchese and Genovese families will declare open war on the Rossi syndicate if you kill me here. Lorenzo's lip curled into a cruel, triumphant smile. He reached into the pocket of his trousers and pulled out a small, encrypted black audio recorder. He pressed a button. The quiet hum of the medical bay was suddenly filled with the playback of a voice. Kill the maid. I want to handle the baby myself. A pillow over the face will leave no marks. A tragic crib death. It was Camilla's exact words from 3 minutes ago, recorded in perfect high-fidelity audio. Silas bugged every square inch of this penthouse the moment we moved my son here, Lorenzo said coldly, pocketing the device. The commission will hear this tape tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. There will be no war. There will only be a unanimous vote. By noon, your entire faction will be dismantled. Your remaining capos will be absorbed into my syndicate, and you will be erased from history. Lorenzo turned his head slightly, addressing the massive men waiting in the hall. Dominic, Rocco. Yes, boss, the 2 enforcers answered in unison. Take this trash to the soundproof holding cells in the sub-basement. Have Dr. Aris patch up her wrist. I want her fully conscious, fully aware, and feeling every ounce of her failure when I present her to the commission tomorrow. No, Lorenzo, wait. Please, I'll sign everything over. Don't let them take me, Camilla screamed, thrashing wildly as Dominic and Rocco hauled her up by her armpits. Her expensive designer heels dragged uselessly against the hardwood floor. Her desperate, sobbing screams faded into the distance as the heavy emergency stairwell doors slammed shut, plunging the hallway back into an eerie silence. The siege was over. Lorenzo stood in the center of the room for a long moment, his broad chest heaving as the adrenaline slowly began to recede. He unchambered the shotgun, flicked the safety on, and laid the heavy weapon down on a stainless steel medical tray. Then he turned to Hunter. The terrifying, untouchable Don of the Rossi Empire vanished. In his place was just a man, a father, who had come inches away from losing his entire world for the second time. Hunter was trembling uncontrollably now. The shock was setting in her knees, feeling like water. The bloody scalpel slipped from her numb fingers, clattering loudly against the tiled floor. In 3 long strides, Lorenzo crossed the room. He didn't speak. He simply reached out and pulled Hunter into a crushing, desperate embrace. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, breathing in the scent of her, a mix of milk fear and sheer survival. His massive, calloused hands spanned her back, holding her so tightly it was as if she were the only thing tethering him to the earth. I've got you," Lorenzo whispered hoarsely, the words vibrating against her skin. "It's over, Mia cara. You're safe. My son is safe." Hunter collapsed against his solid chest, her hands fisting in the fabric of his shirt as the tears finally broke free. "She was going to kill him, Lorenzo. She was going to mother him right in front of me." "But she didn't," Lorenzo said fiercely. He pulled back just enough to frame Hunter's tear-streaked face with his large hands. His thumbs gently wiped away the plaster dust and tears from her cheeks. His dark eyes were filled with an emotion so deep, so raw and unprotected, it made Hunter's breath catch in her throat. "Because you fought for him. You fought for us, Hunter. You brought light back into a dead house." Lorenzo leaned down. He didn't ask for permission, and Hunter didn't want him to. He pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was possessive, deeply passionate, and filled with a burning, undeniable devotion. It was a claim. Hunter melted into the heat of it, wrapping her arms around his thick neck, anchoring herself to the powerful king who had sworn to protect her from the darkness of the world. The kiss tasted of salt and absolute salvation. A sudden demanding wail broke the silence. They parted slowly, both of them breathless, resting their foreheads together. A soft, genuine smile broke through the heavy tension on Lorenzo's face. Hunter turned and reached into the bassinet, lifting the crying, kicking baby into her arms. Leo was rooting blindly against her chest, hungry, angry at the noise, and entirely oblivious to the fact that an empire had just been dismantled and saved in his name. "Someone," Hunter whispered, wiping a lingering tear from her eye as she cradled the boy, "is very aggressively demanding his late-night feeding." Lorenzo stepped up behind her, wrapping a heavy protective arm around Hunter's waist, pulling both her and his son back against his chest. He looked out into the hallway, where his remaining soldiers stood at attention, waiting for orders. "Salvatore!" Lorenzo called out to his lieutenant. "Get a cleanup crew up here immediately and inform the men." Lorenzo's voice hardened, projecting absolute authority. "From this night forward, Hunter is not staff. She is family. Her word is my word. Her safety is my life. If anyone disrespects her, they answer to me." "Am I understood?" "Yes, Don Lorenzo," the men echoed, bowing their heads respectfully toward Hunter. Lorenzo looked down at the beautiful, brave woman, holding his son, pressing a soft kiss to her temple. "Let us go feed our boy." He murmured the word "our," hanging beautifully and permanently in the air between them. "Tomorrow, the Rossi Syndicate steps into a new era, and I will show the world exactly who my queen is." Hunter Higgins started as a broken, grieving maid, hiding from a cruel world. But through an extraordinary act of maternal love, she became the fierce protector of a Mafia heir and the undeniable queen of the Rossi Empire. Lorenzo and Hunter's journey proves that sometimes the most impenetrable fortresses are breached not by bullets but by compassion, and the deepest wounds are healed by unexpected love. Little Leo grew up strong, healthy, and fiercely protected by the mother who chose him in the dark. If this dramatic tale of Mafia betrayal, high-stakes suspense, and the incredible healing power of a mother's love kept you on the edge of your seat, we want to hear from you. Please like this video, share it with your friends who love a thrilling romance, and hit that subscribe button for more intense, real-life inspired storytelling. Drop a comment below. What would you have done in Hunter's shoes? See you in the next story.